So what's the difference between a Christian baker and a big tech corporate behemoth? Well, according to some globalist douchebags, social justice warriors on the left, one needs to hop on the inclusivity gravy train, even if bowing down means going against their deepest beliefs, while the other can collude with other tech giants to exclude and censor whoever they want, because, hey, they're private companies. And there's that thing that, what's it called? Oh yeah, the free market. But as usual, these fucking morons are completely ass backwards, and big tech has nothing to do with free markets. And today, I'm going to prove it, and I'm going to give you talking points that you can use to stick it to your woke friends. Not that they're going to listen anyway. Welcome back to Renegade News. If you haven't already, smash that like and the subscribe button, and let's get right into it. The statist, globalist, social justice warrior, left, progressive, liberal, parasite, whatever it is that they're calling themselves this week, have to be the most hypocritical bunch of a-holes to ever infect freedom-loving people. I mean, you remember Jack Phillips, the Christian baker in Colorado who didn't want to bake the cake for the gay couple? The left went absolutely nuts trying to compare him to doctors who once saved someone who had been in a car accident because they didn't agree with what they had said.
Scorching national debate.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
That went all the way to the highest court in the land. And today,
they said that the free market was allowing for discrimination by allowing him to not serve this poor couple who obviously had hundreds of other bakers that they could choose from. And even though Mr. Phillips himself said he doesn't discriminate against anybody, and that he simply doesn't want to bake cakes for every message. And he also said that he would refuse to create a dessert that insulted the LGBTQ community. But that didn't matter. That didn't stop the social justice warriors from demonizing him right along with the evils of free market capitalism. But now, that same group of hypocrites defends the free market, saying that if Facebook and Twitter want to censor one side of the news, they have every right to do it. And how dare any of us who care about freedom of speech encroach on someone's private business, telling them what they can or cannot say or censor on the private platforms that they allow us to use for free. AT&T can't refuse to open a phone account for you or limit your conversations based on your worldview. Likewise, Southwest Airlines can't pick and choose who rides its aircraft based on their opinion about transgenderism or Russiagate. Yet the tech giants get to do exactly that. Why? Well, obviously, it's because big tech censorship is so one-sided, and their woke asses would fight to the death to support their woke comrades using any excuse available that they can. I probably don't need to remind you that big tech, mainstream media, and the globalist elite are all pushing a single leftist agenda that's so obvious you can spot it a mile away. And while at first your leftist friends will lie to you and say that expert opinion isn't being censored, when you provide proof that it is, they're just going to switch tactics to justifying it instead. Like when Simon Godek, who has a PhD in biotechnology and researches system dynamics, tweeted a link to a scientific title studied... Oops, you almost got me. I can't name it here. But anyway, when he was censored for mentioning a certain peer-reviewed study, big tech apologists asked, why can't a private company censor whoever they want? Do you want governments saying what private companies can or cannot do? Senator Josh Hawley, the author of the book The Tyranny of Big Tech, calls big tech the greatest threat to American liberty. And while he says American liberty, we all know he really means Western civilization in general. But Canada, Australia, and the UK are already way further down that tyrannical path. Anyway, he says these are folks that want to try to impose their agenda. And it's a leftist woke agenda on the country. Big tech wants to tell people what you can post, wants to control the news, control what people read, and what journalism looks like. So let's face some facts. Big tech as an industry, it's really as far from being a real free market as anything can be. And it really acts more like a cabal because they're so highly concentrated. According to Justice Clarence Thomas, one person controls Facebook and just two control Google. He compares these big tech giants more to public utilities than private companies, saying that when a user does not already know exactly where to find something on the internet, and users rarely do, Google is the gatekeeper between that user and the speech of others 90% of the time. He goes on to say that this is a problem because it can suppress content by de-indexing or downlisting a search result, or by steering users away from certain content by manually altering autocomplete results. Now, while I don't necessarily agree with Justice Thomas's opinion that it's the Supreme Court that's going to have to put an end to this big tech tyranny, I do agree that it must be ended, or it could mean the end of free speech in the 21st century. And I also agree that the tech industry more closely resembles a cartel than a marketplace because the tight-knit power structure creates such a high barrier of entry for new companies. Big tech apologists love to spit out platitudes like, oh, if you don't like it, why not just go out there and start your own? But as the collusion involved in taking down Twitter alternative Parler proved, trying to make it in big tech is more like a small-time drug dealer trying to fight the cartels and make a name for himself in Tijuana, Mexico, than anything resembling a free market and free market entrepreneurship. I mean, when the free market pushed Parler to #1 on Apple's App Store, the cartels rallied the troops and banned them on both Apple and Google, the two companies that own the lion's share of the phone market and the app market. But they didn't stop there. The godfathers at Amazon joined in, banning the use of their servers, shutting down Parler immediately and forcing them to find a new host. And according to Parler CEO Mark Matzey in a Fox News interview, it's not just Amazon and Apple. Every vendor from text messaging services to email providers to our lawyers all ditch us too on the same day.
Well, it's devastating is what it is, and it's an assault on everybody. I mean, they all worked together to make sure at the same time we would lose access to not only our apps, but they're actually shutting all of our servers off tonight, off the internet. So they made an attempt to not only kill the apps, but to actually destroy the entire company. And it's not just these three companies. Every vendor from text message services to email providers to our lawyers all ditched us too on the same day. And they're trying to falsely claim that we were somehow responsible for the events that occurred on the 6th.
In many ways, this is similar to when Twitter stepped in to protect their buddies at CNN from James O'Keefe at Project Veritas. The cabal all likes to stick together. So what can be done? What can we do about this? I mean, clearly we can't rely on the Biden administration. After all, like a Daily Caller tally said, 14 of his picks for the transition team are big tech alumni. And according to the New York Post, Biden probably owes his presidency in part to big tech, which rushed to censor this newspaper's reporting on the Hunter files on the patently false pretext that the Post had peddled disinformation or hacked material. And besides, the government is never going to be the answer. Monopolies and cartels are all creations of government, not markets. For example, Dr. Ron Paul, reporting Mises.org, said the reason the media is dominated by a few large companies is no one can operate a television or radio station unless they obtain a federal approval and pay federal licensing fees. Similarly, anybody wishing to operate a cable company must not only comply with federal regulations, they must sign a franchise agreement with their local government. For a monopoly to exist, the government has to tilt the playing field towards what Dr. Paul calls well-connected crony capitalists. So our only solution is for entrepreneurs, investors, and really anyone who cares about freedom of speech and association to reject regulations, reject taxes, and reject the subsidies that are enjoyed by the politically connected businesses like Facebook, Twitter, and Google. We have to stop being quiet because the globalists are not only obnoxious loudmouths, they are actively working to silence all of the dissent. So we have to be even louder. We need to prove over and over to our friends and family who are still on the fence about this stuff that it's really going on and why it's bad. We need to use every tool at our disposal, including the court system, like Candace Owens and James O'Keefe are doing. But more importantly, we need to use our voices and we need to vote with our feet. Several decentralized platforms are slowly arriving on the scene, like LBRY, Odyssey, Float, Parler, and others. And more independent media outlets like Rebel News, OANN, We Are Change, Press for Truth, and of course Renegade News are pushing to get this important information distributed as widely as we can. And while we fight an uphill battle against the globalist favored and funded crony capitalists, if all of us become evangelists for these platforms and the media that support freedom and liberty, while we continue to push back against higher tax, more regulations, and other big tech power grabs, we can get back our freedom of speech. That will allow the free market to eventually build platforms that support freedom of speech and where like-minded individuals can gather together at last. And the tech oligarchs can either disappear into the woodwork, or at worst just become gathering grounds for the woke status cults to bitch and whine amongst themselves about how all the free thinkers are out there enjoying life. And without getting in the way of those of us who are trying to improve our lives and the world with real freedom and liberty. And that's important, even if you think you have nothing to say. Because remember, peaceful resistance is not futile. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you click the link in the description and subscribe right now so that every week you get the inside scoop on the latest infringements and wins in your fight for more freedom and liberty. If you enjoyed this edition of Renegade News, please hit the like and the share button. We would really appreciate it.